My goal on the internet is to be creative, cross-cultural, and constructive, but I've realized that most of my time that I spend on the internet is not being very creative or constructive. It's actually spending a lot of time consuming, a disproportionate amount of time consuming, basically treating the internet like a glorified television. I wrote the following tweet storm kind of as a manifesto for myself, something that I'm trying to do in my own life. I think I'm partially there, but I've started to realize that a lot of what I even think of as creative so far in my time spent on the internet hasn't been very creative. It's been kind of copying other people's stuff or thoughts or ideas or workflow patterns. It's been rearranging things. It's not really been creative. Even in the videos that I've made, there have been more craftsmanship. Peter Thiel, in his book 0 to 1, he talks about how so much of what we do in the business world or in the government or in any human endeavor is really just rearranging stuff that's already been done. It's copying. It's not moving from 0 to 1. It's taking a 1 and making copies and copies and copies. And like a bad game of telephone, before you know it, you end up having a totally different message. There's a lot of noise that enters that system the more the copies are made. If you make a copy of a copy of a copy, there's a lot of degradation that happens in that process. I've realized that I've been kind of a copycat. I've not really been a creator. So this little manifesto here about creativity, consumption, and capital in the information age is my attempt to be more creative in the next few years, to move from consumption through curation, and in that curating process, to be more of a craftsman, and finally, to be a creator. Someone's actually making something brand new. So here's the tweet storm. You can read this from beginning to end in a document form on Google Docs, which I got linked below, or you can read the tweets in their entirety on Twitter, also linked in the description below. On creativity, consumption, and capital in the information age, a thread. Most of us have been lulled into passive consumption as the default state of humanity in the information age. If your input to output ratio is 10 to 0, then try to increase your output incrementally. The haters will come out of the woodwork and tell you you're wasting your time. In a sense, they will be right. Your output won't be good at first. But if you leverage the hater feedback as constructive criticism and refine and iterate, you will start to uncover what really interests you creatively, not just passively. Shoot low. Just try to get your online output to equal 1/10 of your input. 10 to 1 input to output ratio is better than 10 to 0. As you increase and refine the quality and quantity of your output, you'll begin to realize that much of the input you've considered invaluable isn't all that great. You'll become more picky about your input and start trying to align your input with the interests that define your output. Next thing you know, you'll be craving less input that is purely passive, entertaining, and binge-worthy, and more input that is constructive to your creative goals. This is not an overnight process by any means, but the transformation from information consumer to information curator and craftsman will be worth it. The evolution of information sharing can be thought of like this. The king, the priest, and the scribe controlled the flow of information for thousands of years. Not so much out of a dictatorial inclination, but more as a result of technological necessity. With the printing press, this class-based information distribution system was disrupted. The power of the king, priest, and scribe was irrevocably undermined, or so it would seem. But then came the machines. To some degree, Marx was right about the way in which industrial technology cordoned off access to the means of production in a new technocratic class system. Those with access to expensive equipment began to repair the class-based system of information control through machines. Kings were replaced by media moguls and corporations like Hearst or Murdoch, or book publishers. Scribes were replaced by industrial printing presses, and priests were replaced by pundits, journalists, editors, think tanks, professors, and authors. With the industrialization of the printing press, Gutenberg's peer-to-peer disruption was captured by both capital and regulation. The irony of newspapers' tendency towards socialism should be recognized here. The newspaper in its very existence is a crony capitalist enterprise that cordons off the means of information production and distribution from the proletariat. The internet and the World Wide Web come along, two innovations socialists should love: access to the means of production and distribution. But what do the newspapers do? Start a new class war mocking bloggers as the know-nothing proletariat. How bourgeois. Now the governments of the world and the kings, priests, and scribes of the media want to do everything they can to keep you from realizing the power you have with this technological marvel we call the internet. But they're smart enough to realize that a direct 1984-style crackdown will not work. Huxley's Brave New World provides a better strategy. Keep us glued to consumption through our eyes, ears, bellies, and pleasure centers. In the brave new World Wide Web, you are being lulled into passive consumption. Make no mistake, this is a class war. The producers are enslaving you and I through comfortable consumption. It is a Stockholm syndrome so pleasant it will escape the notice of even the most stubborn individualist. This strategy is nothing new. The most effective way to enslave a population is through pleasurable dependence. Therefore, the sage, in the exercise of his government, empties their minds, fills their bellies, weakens their wills, and strengthens their bones. The Tao Te Ching, chapter 3, verse 3. The faux Marxists realized that the best way to enslave the proletariat was not by outlawing the means of production, but by making them think that this technology is a one-way tool, a means of consumption. The consumption class can win, but this will require everyone to wean ourselves off of the pleasure dome and begin using the internet as access to the means of the production and distribution of information instead of as a glorified television. The die is cast. The individual has won. The revolution Gutenberg ushered in with the printing press over a half-millennium ago has only just begun. You want to join a movement? Then make your own. Use the internet as it was intended. The kings, scribes, and priests of the old information empire will concoct all manner of pretty sights and sounds to keep you tethered to the system, but as you move from 10 to 0 input to output ratio to 1 to 1, you won't miss them.